Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, 3D Models and Renderings for Live Events. My name is Lindsay Lee, and I'm the Marketing Specialist for the entertainment industry here at Vectorworks. Before we begin, I would like to cover a few housekeeping items. First, this webinar is being recorded, and the on-demand version will be posted to Vectorworks University, where you could find this webinar as well as all past webinars. And after the webinar, we'll be sending out an email with the recording to everyone who registered. Lastly, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please write them in the question box, which is located right in your control panel, and we'll save some time at the end to get through them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our presenter for today, Jim Woodward. Jim is a Senior Entertainment Product Specialist at Vectorworks. He has over 40 years experience in worldwide event production for a wide variety of industries, including live performance, film, television, corporate events, trade shows, museums, architectural projects, and retail. Jim has been incorporating CAD and 3D visualization into the entertainment workflow since 1986. So let's give Jim a warm welcome and we'll go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Lindsay, and welcome everybody. My name is Jim, and today we're going to spend the next 45 minutes discussing 3D modeling for entertainment in Vectorworks Spotlight. We're going to start with some simple geometry, and we'll work our way into more elaborate example files. And wherever we leave it off here today, please join us at Vectorworks University, and plenty there to take this further. So the agenda today, we're going to show you basic navigation in Vectorworks, as well as working with planes, some solids modeling, some surface modeling with NURBS, subdivision modeling, and we'll finish with some texturing and a little bit of lighting and rendering. So basically, an introduction to 3D modeling. Vectorworks includes a flexible combination of tools and commands to create and manipulate 3D models. There are generally multiple ways to create any model, but using the right objects, tools, and commands in the right sequence can both increase efficiency and improve results. So getting started, let's talk a little bit about 3D navigation. Vectorworks makes it easy to navigate through the use of the numeric keypad. So working on a laptop, it's feasible, but I highly recommend that you work on an extended keyboard with a numeric keypad. Saving a lot of save views. You'll see how I go through a presentation where I kind of break it up into different sections through the save views and kind of tell the story through that. And then the tool sets, mainly the navigation is all through the flyover, walkthrough, translate view, and rotate view, and those can all be found in the visualization tool set. The 3D mouse compatible, there's animation options, and there's also some clip cube options to break down by level with a bounding box. And we're going to start off with a little bit of 3D navigation, but before we do, we want to go into the preferences. There's a few tabs that you want to make sure that you go in. One is center on objects after view changes, so you don't have to go chasing around an object you have selected. Whenever you change the view, it'll make sure that that stays within the window. Also in the edit, we have, in the 3D, when you change from render modes, when you go the default 3D view, when you go from 2D to 3D views, I like to stay in wireframe, and I also like to stay in orthogonal. And it's just, to me, it's a little easier to ask it to go into perspective when I want it, as well as going into a rendered mode. Now, using the numeric keypad, if you look at overhead, number 5, 1, 3, 7, and 9 are the ISO views, as well as 0 is top plan view, and 2 is from the front, 8's from the back, 4 and 6 are from the side. So once you get used to that numeric keypad, it's real easy to bounce around to those views. And also using the flyover tool with interactive, wherever you click on an object, that becomes the center of rotation. So saving a lot of views, you'll see how I use that. So let's get started to the next chapter. Moving on to working planes and align to planes. If you go into the 3D modeling toolset, you'll find set working plane and another tool for align plane. Set working plane is the first mode, 3-point click. We click on that face and we now have a working plane. We can save those and recall those. And the second is the planar face mode, where we can just select any plane and it'll automatically align to that. There's another option with some of the select 2D tools. In the navigation bar, we'll find automatic. And when using things like rectangles or circles, it'll automatically work on those planes. And there's an option in the mode bar to go into the push-pull and the solids operation directly from that. Solid objects, which contain a volume including extrudes, regular, tapered, multiple, and a long path. Also some sweeps, shells, fillets, chamfers, some solid primitives, which include spheres, cones, etc., solid additions and subtractions, and some others. Several tools and commands, primarily in the 3D modeling toolset and in the modify and model menus, can create and reshape solids. Many solid objects also have a nested editable history. By contrast, generic solids are scrubbed of all their history. Let's show you some examples of some extrudes. The first, a simple rectangle. And then in the model menu, we'll find extrude, give it a height. We can also give it a negative height to go down. And then once we've entered that, we can go into the object info palette. In this example, I'm going to just use a little bit of math and give it 1.5 times its height. We can also adjust its Z height of the bottom of the object. Next, if we take two rectangles and use the multiple extrude, you'll see the results from that. And the next tapered extrude, where we give it both a height and a taper angle. Next, extrude along path. I have this rectangle and I'm going to duplicate this. Rotate it 45 degrees on its center in 3D. Select both of those, and then I'm going to add those two together to make one polyline. We'll select this polyline and extrude along path. We select which we want as the path and which we want as the profile. Next, going into the push-pull. We select the push-pull tool, select a face, we can also hit the tab key and enter the value numerically of the move. It works on radiuses as well. Next, we're going to go into the new offset edge tool. Two modes to this. Select an edge or the edge loop mode. This will go right into a push-pull combine mode. We select an edge, selecting which arrow we want to go in direction. We will put in 2 inches and then select which face we want to extrude. One more time. And then the final step. So that's the new push-pull offset edge mode. And next, I'm going to round and chamfer these edges. We'll start with a constant radius fillet, 1/2 inch. We select the edge. There's some options where we can select multiple edges. Hitting this checkbox to complete. The next is variable radius. So 50% in, I'll have 3 inch. So let's set these. 25% in, let's go a 1/4 inch. We'll set that. 50% in, we'll go a 1/2 inch. And 75% will go back to 0.25 inches. Hit OK. Select the edges. Return or select that green check. We'll edit that just a little bit. Let's go 0.75. We can also go on an inside corner. We use the same workflow for the chamfer tool. We'll give that a setback of 3/4 inch. We'll select the edges, holding down Shift for multiple, and then hit the green check button or return to complete. We can also use the same process, select tangent entities, and that will select adjoining edges. Next, we're going to go into a sweep. I have 2 circles and a rectangle. Select those and use the modify add surface command to grab those for one polyline. We also have a 2D loci as the center of rotation. Select the sweep tool, and we're going to give it 360-degree rotation. We'll rotate that, Command L, drag that up. We can also select in the Object Info palette, and we'll select the pitch and give that 36-inch rise. We're also going to tell it sweep 360 times 4. And you'll see that profile as we look at the end of that and how it's swept around that center pivot. Next, let's show you a few of the solids operations. First, add solids. We grab all 3 of those and we double click on that. We go into the Edit Solid Edition and we can change, let's say the bottom Z height, will drop those down a little bit. You'll see the result. That's one object. Next, we'll select those 3. We'll use the subtract solids. Select which one we want to retain, which one's subtracting. We can also go into that history and edit those. Next, intersect solid. You'll see the results from that. And last, the section solid. I have this extrude and a NURBS surface. We select both of those, select which one we want as the splitting surface, hit OK, and we also have a reverse direction in the object info palette. Use NURBS surfaces and associated tools and commands such as the loft surface, extract, and project tools in the 3D PowerPack command suite to create non-rational free-form shapes such as drapes and other flowing objects, and then use weighted vertices to pull the surface into shape. Surfaces can be converted into solid shapes using features such as the Shell Solid tool and the Stitch and Trim Surfaces command. The basic NURBS modeling process: you create a NURBS curves and/or the surfaces, you modify those as needed, and then you create the solid geometry from those. Now the first is creating NURBS curves. There's 3 ways to do this. You can just create a simple 2D polyline, and then in the modify menu convert that. The second is to use the NURBS curve tool, which will create the NURBS curve and give you the Z-axis control points without any conversion. And the last is to use existing geometry and tracing those edges and extracting that. Now creating NURBS surfaces, there's 5 methods. The same way you can create a 2D shape and then convert. You can create surfaces from existing solids, highlighting the faces. And then lofting, where we create 2 curves and then use the loft command to create the shape in between. The next method, if we have a set of enclosed curves, we can select those and it will generate a shape based on the view you're looking at it. And then the last, again, extracting from existing geometry and grabbing a face rather than just an edge. The next is converting NURBS to solid geometry. The first method, creating path extrudes from curves, we locate an existing curve along with the 2D shape and run the model extrude along path command. The next method, we create a solid shell from a surface, and then we locate an existing surface, activate the shell tool with the desired thickness, and then click on the surface. The third method, creating a solid from a set of surfaces, locate an existing set of enclosed surfaces, and then run the model 3D PowerPack Stitch and Trim Surfaces command. The next step, modifying NURBS curves and surfaces. We reshape a curve or surface by double-clicking on it or selecting the Reshape tool. We can rebuild a curve and change the number of vertices by running the Model 3D PowerPack Rebuild NURBS command. And then we can extend a curve or surface by locating an existing curve or surface and then run the Model 3D PowerPack Extend NURBS Surfaces. And lastly, this is one of my favorites. We have the surface array, where you select some 3D geometry, select a surface, create the surface, and you can select the number of repetitions or a fixed distance for both the X and Y. You can trim, overlap, or omit. In this instance, we'll trim. We don't need the base surface to be shown. And then we can adjust that settings in the Object Info palette. Our next topic, subdivision modeling. It's a very powerful and flexible method of creating objects that have an organic or free-form shape. Starting with a geometric subdivision primitive object or converting other objects, you manipulate a polygonal cage mesh to sculpt the desired shape. I started off with a simple extrude. We'll go and convert that into a subdivision. Number of iterations, 3. And then starting with the Edit Subdivision tool or double-clicking on the object, the first mode will select the split mode. And we can use the Tab key and then enter a value directly. One more from the center. And then from the front, we'll do one at 50% as well. Now we use the transform mode, selecting multiple points, and then using the 3D dragger to push and pull those surfaces. Holding down the back quote key will disable snapping temporarily and make it a lot easier to pull these. The 3D dragger also allows us to rotate the direction of the pull. Takes a little bit of practice, but once you get the hang of it, it's very flexible in creating these free-form shapes. And lastly, a little bit about meshes. Meshes are useful in Vectorworks to import models from other programs and to help convert objects. But meshes are very expensive in terms of computing, and they're really difficult to edit efficiently. It's often best to convert a mesh into a different object type to edit more effectively, or to just simply reduce a mesh. Let's create a fascia for this stage. We'll go into multi-view. It's a great way to use the 3D modeling, changing elevations of control points and seeing the effect in 3D at the same time. So we'll use the polyline tool. We'll draw a shape, nothing too exact. We're going to go in and reshape it in just a second. Double click to go into the reshape, and then just push and pull this shape a little bit. Make something a little more unique, less symmetrical. At any point, we can use the modes to add points, delete points, change points into corner modes, as opposed to the curves. Once we're done, one little touch up here. There we go. And last, let's go convert this to a NURBS. And looking at from this view, we're going to duplicate it and then move it. And we'll go up 72 inches, grab both of those and use the loft surface tool. Now if we go into the reshape, we can then constrain it to any of the axes. And we can see the results from the other views. We'll just push and pull this. We'll bring these on the side up a little bit. So your choice whether you want to work in multi-view or if you want to just do it and rotate around a little bit. And that should do it. Next, we're going to go on the Y coordinate, and we're going to drag out the bottom. Again, seeing the results on the other views. And going back to flyover. Now that we have our NURBS surface, let's go and give it some depth. We'll shell solid at 3.5 inches, select the surface, hit OK. And next what we're going to do is we're going to use a great new feature from 2023. The offset edge tool you'll find with the offset, and now there's two modes of this. The first one is a loop mode where it will select the entire loop of the surface. Hit tab and we can enter, and then we have a mode that automatically goes into the push-pull mode, and we're going to bring that out 2 inches. Now that was the second mode of the tool. The first mode of the tool is just to select a single edge. Let's select this inner edge, select that yellow arrow, we'll go up 4 inches, and then we'll recess it minus 1 inch. Same thing in the direction we want to go, 4 inches, and then it goes right into the push-pull mode, minus 1. Now I want to apply some texturing to these two channels. I'm going to bring the ambient light down just a little bit. We'll select an overall texture to the whole object. And then I'm going to use the texture tool to apply to individual faces. We'll select this texture and then click on the face we want to apply it to. There's ways to copy and paste between these surfaces. And apply to all surfaces that have the same texture. So there's our first quick example of some texturing. We'll get into a little more later. Let's push some curtains around. I'm going to start off using a gloss texture just so we see a little more of the detail. We're going to start with some polylines. Use the freehand tool to start with. Just make a freehand shape, wavy line. Close enough. And then, you guessed it, convert to NURBS. So when we have this line, and then from the front, we're going to make the rails. Look at it from the front, and we'll just use the polyline tool once again. And we created those curves. I'll delete that one. We already have one. And then we did the inside one in the same method. Now, selecting the loft tool, and we're in the by rail mode, which allows us to pick the two rails, first and second, and then the profile, we want to go in between those curves. You'll see how it follows that. Next, we'll go to the other side and do a swag. The profile being in the other plane. We'll keep the solid. And apply a texture. scale that just a little bit. And then we'll use the mirror tool down the center of the stage. We'll pull those in just a little bit. Holding the modifier key down, we'll duplicate those. We'll select the two that we just duplicated and drag those upstage a little bit. So there we have some shiny curtains. We'll replace that with a better texture later on. Our next step will recreate a video element on the front of the riser decks. We can use the video tools for LED walls, but we're just going to create this for a texture. Just using the polyline tool, double clicking to end. Now we're going to use the offset tool, and we'll offset that 4 inches, and not offsetting a duplicate, but just offsetting the original. We'll convert that to a curve, and then we're going to duplicate that. And then move 3D up 72 inches, the height of the decks. We'll loft surface using no rail. It'll just create a straight line between the two curves. The first curve, the second, and complete. Creating a solid, we're going to create just a NURBS surface that comes in on group, and there's 7 NURBS surfaces for each of the planes. And selecting that, we're going to shell selecting all 7 of those and completing that. We now have a solid. Apply a texture. And scale it. We use the same process to trace the curve upstage. We're in the cubic vortex mode, which allows us to just click along that arc and complete. Convert to a NURBS curve, and then we did the same process to just elevate that 24 inches for those upstage risers. We're going to create a custom stairway. We're going to use the simple stair tool and just let the parametric objects do its thing and give it its height and its width and all the other parameters. We're going to use the open riser, and when we ungroup that, we'll get a warning that asks us if we really want to do that, but it's just fine to ungroup parametric objects and use that geometry. We created an extrude from that polyline, and then we placed that, used the mirror tool on the center of the stairway to have one on the other side, and then selected all of those and did a solid subtraction. So we'll select those 3. Which one we want to subtract from is the stairway, and we're left with that. Then if I reposition one of these stringers and use the same trick with an extruded rectangle to omit the portion not needed upstage. Subtract solid. And using the mirror tool one more time. For the other side. Now we'll select all of those objects. We'll marquee that. And add solids. So we have one solid addition. Now, one of my favorite tools, the deform tool. There's quite a few modes to this. It's definitely something you just want to play around with and try all the different functions. We're going to use the bend tool to start. There's a bulge and a taper, but this one we're just going to use this. We'll click that object, click the center of the pivot, and we'll tab and enter minus 90 degrees. And we'll take a look at that. And finally, let's add from that geometry, we'll use a 3D NURBS curve. And we'll just click on the end of those stringers. It's gaining its Z height as we go up that stairway. And then we're going to select the circle from the 2D tool set and just give that a radius of 1 inch, 2 inch diameter. We'll select that curve along with it, extrude along path, and we have a railing. We'll give that an elevation, duplicate it, and we'll move that bottom one up as well. Now a little bit of freeform render and texturing. So what I want to do is start off with a little extra lighting. You can see I have a few in this scene already, and they're just some Vectorworks spotlight objects. They're not any of the lighting devices. They don't have any control with DMX or any type of parameters, but they do just have some simple way of lighting the scene. I'm just going to work with those. To do those, I like to start usually from a side view, and we start by selecting that tool in the visualization tool set, and we select a light. I'll go to a spotlight. There's a few other types of lights. I have a point light in there as well, but most of the time in the theatrical setting, I'm going to be using this spotlight. And we can check parameters on that beforehand, or first click, it'll bring up this dialog. I'm going to stay with the defaults. From a side view, you can see how I can control the sweep on it nicely, and let's say that's a little far away. I'm going to actually put it a little closer to the stage. We'll put it on one of those stairways. From this view, I would slide that over. And line it up with the lights. The mirror tool is great with the light objects. And we'll put one on the other side. With both of those selected, I can easily edit those. In this instance, I'm going to tighten those down a little bit, and I want a nice soft edge, so I'll bring the beam in and the spread out. Something about a 36 degree. Maybe bring it down just a little bit, and also turn on the lid fog. So we can go into some serious rendering in the view. We have all different styles of rendering between final quality and then custom RenderWorks to really fine tune it. But just to keep this moving along, I'm going to stay in the new shaded view, which allows more than 8 lights now, which is great. And we're just going to turn the house lights out so to speak, and I have a hotkey for my lighting options, and I'm just going to bring this light down a little bit. So that's basically how I put this lighting in. I grouped it and made it a little easier to edit it. And now I'm going to do a little bit of texturing. So let's get started with that. Now that we have some lighting, let's start out with a little bit of texturing. Let's first start out with these shiny curtains. Let's change that. These are assigned, if I select all of those, these are all assigned to a class definition. So if I want to change those, what I want to do is go into the organizational palette in my classes. You'll see I have Fabric 1. If I right click and edit and go into the textures, that's set to a metal chrome. We obviously don't want that for soft goods. Let's select that textile. Now you'll see the render tab will allow us to scale that. Depending on which ones we select. Now let's create a texture. Let's go into the resource manager. We'll double click in the current file and RenderWorks texture. We'll start off with an image for the attribute. We'll bring in this JPEG. If I edit that, we'll select the size at 480 and the object size at 480 as well. Now I can use a couple of options here in the reflectivity. I could give it a shine on the front, but we obviously don't want that. We would like a glow to make this image pop like it was a video wall or some video tiles. So let's select glow, and I'm going to leave that at 100%. We'll go with that, and last thing we wanted to do was to name that. Now there's a couple of ways that we can apply that to a surface or an object. If we drag it, it will highlight. And then we can use rotation or scaling on that. We can also use other tools to assign it to certain planes and then size it with the attribute mapping tool, as well as this texture tool, which was new last year. This is a great feature that we can apply textures directly to a surface. And this allows us, with that tool, to select a face, apply to the whole object, or replace a matching texture. So if I had multiple surfaces that all had the same texture, all I had to do was select one of them, and then a pickup and a dropper mode. So let's select the face, and we can go with something. Go with maybe a matte black. You'll see we can pick each individual face. And now that I have those, any of those faces that I changed, let's set a background. I have one already, but I want to make this a little darker in this scene. We'll go into the current file, and you'll see I have this. We'll edit that and change the color. We'll go to a very dark gray. We have the fog density At 3, I'm going to bump that up just a little bit. In the new shaded render settings, we can show environment reflections, the environment lighting, and object reflections, and whether or not we show shadows just on the ground. And in document settings, we now have this option to lift the 8 light limit for shaded rendering modes. So this really speeds up doing some experimental lighting before you get into the DMX mode. Well, hopefully that gave you a few ideas about how we can use the Vectorworks modeling tools for entertainment. And if you'd like to look into the Vectorworks cloud services, there's a lot where you can take these models to the next level with virtual reality, augmented reality, panoramas, some cloud processing, cloud storage when you're doing some high-end rendering. Save a lot of time by using our servers to process. And some cloud-based apps. There's the Vectorworks remote app, the cloud services web portal, Vectorworks Nomad app, and the desktop app for cloud services. So if hopefully this gave everybody an idea, and if you have any questions, please reach on out to us. And one of the best places to learn all of this is Vectorworks University. So if you go into the Vectorworks Entertainment, you'll see the new offset edge, some shaded rendering options, and a lot of good features that just came out recently. So if you have any other questions, we'll be taking a question and answer now. So please feel free to shout out any questions. Thanks.